Right now, though, time for the press preview, our first look at Monday's front pages. And tonight, we'll be having a look at the headlines with the former Conservative Special Advisor, Anita Boateng, and the political editor for HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield. Great to see you. We'll speak in a moment once we've had a look at those front pages, beginning with the Metro. Leading with the Home Secretary's speeding fine row, Suella in fast chance saloon. And pressure on PM to launch inquiry into Braverman's speeding row, reads the front of The Guardian, as they too look at claims that Suella Braverman broke the ministerial code. Here's the front of tomorrow's Daily Express, claiming an exclusive. Its headline, Europe turns a blind eye to let migrants reach UK. NHS app to let patients book private healthcare, reads the front of The Times, as it looks at plans to cut waiting lists. Let's show you the front of the Daily Mail. It's analysing a new report that states drug driving has become more prevalent than drink driving. The FT reports that China slaps a ban on US chip maker after G7 rebuke ramps up tensions. And the Star predicts hot weather. It's Bake Britain, temperatures in the 20s. And tonight we are joined by Anita Boateng and Kevin Schofield. So, lots to talk about this evening. Let's start, shall we, Anita, with the front of The Guardian. Most of the front pages are covering this in some form. This row about Suella Braverman's speeding fine. And tonight we've learnt that Rishi Sunak, just before he boarded the plane from Japan to come back to the UK, he said he is going to meet with his ethics advisor.
Yes, so this is the only political story in town in terms of all the personalities and the classic kind of Sunday story. And The Guardian writes that there is going to be potentially the Prime Minister, as you say, looking into this story, or so the reports are, and they've been around since probably about the afternoon yesterday, that Suella Braverman, and I should be clear, it seems that when she was speeding, she was offered the option to pay a fine or to go on a speed awareness course. Now, there's no indication that she sought to avoid paying the fine altogether by sort of nefarious means, but basically she tried to get this speed awareness course done in a different way, i.e., privately, one-to-one. And there's some indication that she asked civil servants to look into that matter for her, as well as asking one of her political special advisors. So that's where the question has come over whether she may have breached the ministerial code. And that's the thing that the Prime Minister may or may not be under pressure to look into.
Kevin, the Suella Braverman row. Let's just have a look at the front of the Metro, their headline, Suella in fast chance saloon. Anita was making the point that actually what the issue is here in terms of the ministerial code is if she was asking for advice on a personal matter to civil servants and advisors.
Yeah, I mean, I think the allegation certainly is that that is a breach of the ministerial code. As you said, Rishi Sunak is going to speak to Sir Laurie Magnus, his independent ethics advisor, tomorrow to have a chat about it and work out whether a full-blown inquiry is required. Both Labour and the Lib Dems, unsurprisingly, say that there should be an inquiry. They see this, obviously, as an opportunity to have a go at the government. And, yeah, you could tell this morning at Rishi Sunak's press conference in Japan that he was irritated, pretty tetchy. Obviously didn't want to be speaking about a controversy surrounding his Home Secretary. He wanted to be talking about the G7 summit itself. So it's not great. It's not looking great for Suella Braverman. I think it's safe to say that she's on the naughty step at the moment. And it just depends now whether it is escalated by Rishi Sunak into a full-blown inquiry. And yeah, it's not great. It's not a great look for the Home Secretary, even if on the face of it, it looks like, you know, a relatively minor infraction. That being said, this impression that it gives of maybe a government minister trying to act, you know, as if they have special privileges that other people, ordinary people, don't have, then that's not a great look at all. And you can see why voters would take a pretty dim view of it.
Yeah, and Anita, this is the sort of culmination of a series of events and difficulties for Suella Braverman of late, plus, of course, the fact that she's going to be facing Home Office questions in the Commons as well this week. How safe is she, do you think?
I think we have to separate out these two issues. And this is not an issue. So the last time Suella Braverman perhaps found herself with questions over the ministerial code was concerning a situation where she seemed to have sent something to someone that would normally, not be advisable. Let's put it that way. This seems to be that she sort of asked a question, and there isn't any indication. And I think it's really important to be clear about this, that the option was presented to her as it would be standardly presented to most people if they are caught speeding, to either have the fine or have a speed awareness course. So there was no suggestion that she was simply trying to avoid a fine by having a speed awareness course. Let's be very clear about that. What she was doing was saying, can I take the course in a slightly different way? But this does feel quite different to the other issues where she has run afoul, shall we say, particularly the one around her sending a document to someone who was not, for instance, a civil servant or a minister. And so this one, it might be that it's slightly more, and to most people might feel lower level, because I think I've seen some reports of people slightly struggling to articulate where she might have breached the ministerial code. And I guess on strict reading, you could say that she asked the civil service to do something that might conflict with the instruction that they should use public resources efficiently. It's not the most sort of cut and dried situation. But I can quite understand why Labour and the Liberal Democrats are trying to make as much of it as possible, because they know that on issues such as immigration, these are highly contentious issues, and they have been gunning for Suella for quite some time.
Yeah, and of course the migration figures are going to show that legal net migration at a record high, Kevin, in coming days.
Yeah, we're expecting those figures to come out on Thursday, and they're certainly not going to be great for the government. When they at the last election, they promised to bring down net migration. At that time, it was 226,000. We're looking now at possibly 800,000, even higher. Now there's tension inside the cabinet over what Suella Braverman would say is the imperative of bringing down immigration, whereas the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is a bit more pragmatic and saying, well, look, we have to bear in mind the economic cost of lowering immigration in terms of economic growth. So yeah, it's going to be an uncomfortable day, certainly tomorrow for her at Home Office questions, and even more uncomfortable, I would suggest, on Thursday when these net migration figures come out. And then Tory MPs in particular will be wanting to know exactly what the government is going to do to try and bring those figures down.
Yeah, and let's stick with migration. Front of the Daily Express, Anita, quite a headline this. Europe turns blind eye to let migrants reach the UK, saying that Europe is getting rid, in quotes, of migrants by sending tens of thousands to Britain. This is according to a people smuggler they've spoken to.
Yes, and this is according to a people smuggler. So we should bear that in mind. But there is no doubt that every country in Europe that is, in some way has a porous border, which is pretty much all of them, is suffering under the pressure of the volume of migrants coming over, and that absolutely no country wants to be the only, vessel for all of the migrants that are coming over. Whether that's on boats over the Channel or in any part of Europe, and certainly, like, no country in Europe has figured out a way to, manage this situation, which is proving to be quite overwhelming for significant numbers of countries. So it's certainly the case that I imagine there's a bit of hot potato around migrants, and certainly one of the challenges that the UK has, like many other countries, is getting returns agreements with countries. So there are some countries that are, broadly safe, or for instance, where someone's claim to asylum might be rejected. And at the moment, one of the challenges is getting agreements that those people can be sent back to the country from whence they came. So there is a lot of fraught politics in the migrant situation in Europe, because no country has managed to work out how to successfully deal with the volumes of people that are coming over.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I take Anita's point that she's absolutely right. It's a people smuggler who's making these allegations, so you have to, I guess, take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But there's no doubt that politically it is a hot topic. The government, Rishi Sunak, is focusing primarily on illegal immigration. Stopping the boats is one of his 5 promises that he made at the start of the year, and he will be judged on his success or otherwise on achieving that pledge. And it's really difficult. You know, the boats are still coming, and as you say, the figures on Thursday, albeit these are about legal migration, they're heading in the wrong direction as far as the government's concerned as well. So, you know, the next election is only less than 18 months away now, probably. It will be with us before we know it. And unless Rishi Sunak and the government start to prove that they're making progress on these promises that they've made, both him personally and the Conservatives at the last election, then I think they're in for a pretty tough time.
Yeah, let's talk about something else that's going to be a huge point of contention in the run-up to any general election, the NHS, and how we're going to solve all the issues that it's facing. Front of the Times, Anita, we know Sir Keir Starmer tomorrow is going to make a big speech about Labour's plans for the NHS, but this is a government idea, and the NHS app will allow patients to choose treatment in private hospitals in a bid to cut waiting lists.
Yes, and the Times has the latest figures there of the waiting list currently at 7.33 million, which is an astonishing number. And it's really interesting. The government has been exploring some of these innovative policies. So this one would allow you to book, use, for instance, a private healthcare or a hospital or a referral somewhere in your area, as opposed to having to wait for the NHS. And that's something that has been used in the past, not in the form of apps, but the private sector has been used to get down waiting lists, memorably under Tony Blair. So this is something that has been done before. And private providers are a part of the NHS insofar as you can often, I personally have gotten referrals to private hospitals via the NHS. And it seems to me to be a practical way to help tackle the wait list. And Rishi Sunak also, and it didn't get much coverage, announced that they were going to kind of have pharmacies do and play a much bigger role. And people and your viewers that travel to France will know that, for instance, pharmacies play a much larger role in the NHS and are often the people that you would go to if you had a cold or a sore throat. And normalising some of that could also help and serve to take pressure off the NHS. So I think it's 2 very good innovations.
OK, we'll perhaps get your thoughts on that one, Kevin, in the next hour, because I just want to ask you about Ukraine. It's on the front of The Guardian. Kyiv denying Russia has control of Bakhmut. The Kremlin saying they do have. Either way, they almost have complete control, don't they? And what's left of it, it's a city in ruins.
It absolutely is. I mean, this battle has been going on now for a very long time. It's seen as a very important, both psychologically and strategically. The Russians have been trying to take Bakhmut, as I say, for quite some time. Ukraine has managed to fend them off, but it looks as though the Russians have pretty much taken it over now. Obviously, Volodymyr Zelensky has been in Japan at the G7 and today was denying that was the case. You can obviously understand why he would say that. But yeah, it's not looking great for the Ukrainians there. However, we're still to see the counter-offensive, which we're expecting in the coming months from Ukraine. So sadly, there's no prospect of the war ending anytime soon. And obviously, as I say, Zelensky was in Japan over the last few days trying to drum up more global support for the Ukrainian war effort. So yeah, it seems as though it was relatively successful. Obviously, the UK announced last week as well further support for Ukraine. But, you know, this, as I say, this conflict, unfortunately, there is no end in sight.